The ReCover initiative is on a mission to develop retrofit solutions in Atlantic Canada. They do this by guiding and supporting building owners to retrofit their buildings to make them more energy efficient. To tell us how, here's the ReCover initiative. Hi, Lorrie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's great to be here.
Well, it is because I am so curious about the ReCover initiative and how did it start and why?
Yeah, so ReCover had a pretty organic start in early, probably even before this, but kind of it coalesced in early 2020. Um, I had and Emma and I, my
Mhm.
co-founder, and another person, had been sort of brainstorming ways that we could potentially get some uh, activity going on deep retrofits in our region. And so we had kind of pitched an idea to the province of Nova Scotia through the Department of Resources and Renewables about doing a deep retrofit study on an apartment building in Halifax, looking at the opportunity of panelization. We were very focused on the energy sprung approach to deep retrofits out of the Netherlands,
Mhm.
which is kind of a very factual approach where we can uh, do prefabricated in a factory envelope enclosure retrofits and
Mhm.
then implement them very quickly in the field. So this
Right.
would work great for residential buildings where you didn't want to empty out the building. So we did that study. The province supported us, and we finished in early summer of 2020. And in July, we had a webinar. And because it was 2020
Mm.
summertime, it was something in the neighborhood of 150 people across Canada came to our webinar.
Wow.
And we really, I think we expected much smaller numbers than that. So we had
Wow.
certainly hit a nerve. And we had a lot of conversations with people following that who wanted to engage with us on deep retrofit acceleration.
Mhm.
And that kind of, we leveraged that into doing a second study with Toronto Community Housing, which was we learned a lot and was a really great experience. And then a study for Enercan looking at 6 municipal buildings across Canada. And when we did all these studies, which were technical studies, we learned a whole lot about the barriers that are not really technical for deep
Mm.
retrofits. So there are really some social barriers around just not having the labor force, both in the building industry and in construction and the trades, to implement retrofits at scale. And the big one is money. So these projects are very expensive.
Yeah.
Um, the cost of construction since
It's
2019,
yes.
66% inflation in construction versus 19% in the rest of our kind of economy. So
Yeah.
very hard to do them. So
Yeah. It sounds like it.
yeah, so we realized we're working on the technical problem, and the technical problem isn't the biggest barrier.
Mhm.
And we decided to set up as a nonprofit focused on relieving all of these barriers. So working on improving the capacity in in the building industry and also in the community at large to support building owners to do deep retrofits.
That's awesome. So a lot has happened since your launch, and you definitely struck a nerve. There was a need in the industry for this type of help and assistance. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing since the launch. I know you've got a couple of things
Mhm.
up your sleeve you're working on.
Yeah. So yeah, in The years are blurring together, but in 2023, we applied for funding through NRCan. It might have been even 2022, but we applied for a program under NRCan's Deep Retrofit Accelerator Initiative and got funded. And so ReCover is funded to develop the retrofit market, sort of to be doing market acceleration in across Atlantic Canada.
Mhm.
And so in the fall, last year in the fall of 2024, we rolled out our programs officially we had a launch event in each of the Atlantic provinces. And there's kind of two main projects that we are running with right now,
Mhm.
and there will be more, but the first two one is called the Retrofit Roadmap,
Right.
and the other is the Building Transformation Program. So I'll start with
Mm.
that actually,
Yeah,
maybe.
tell us about the Building
Yeah.
Transformation Program.
So um, essentially, it is a program where we can spend money and support building owners in removing the barriers that they might be experiencing with doing a deep retrofit to their project. It may also be a situation where a building owner is that they're planning to do a more of a shallow retrofit or a small piecemeal retrofit,
Mhm.
and they, with our support, could um, use our resources to do a deeper retrofit. So we're not funding capital costs. We're not paying for, we
Okay.
can't, with our program can't cover that. We're trying to figure that side of it out. But right now,
But you
that's
can
not what we're
help
covering.
people.
But
Yeah,
what
you
we're
can probably help
doing,
them find it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially, a building owner will come to us and, or it can also be, say, an architect or an engineer or
Mhm.
somebody who's already working with the building owner who's got an interest in, doing better with their
Mhm.
building. They come to us and um, we can fund a feasibility study that will analyze the potential pathway for the building to achieve a deep retrofit. Um, what we mean by deep retrofit is a combination, so a holistic retrofit or renovation to a building. So it's not standalone measures like just putting in a heat pump wouldn't be considered, say, a deep retrofit. It really needs to
Yeah.
examine the mechanical systems of the building and the building enclosures for a comprehensive approach at saving energy
Mm.
and improving the health and comfort sort of conditions in the building.
Yeah, like the air quality, the
Exactly.
ventilation. Yeah.
Exactly. So we are targeting projects where there's at least 50% energy saving, and really, we're looking big picture, long term. All of the provinces in Atlantic Canada have commitments to achieve net zero by 2050. Buildings
Mm.
and everything else in our
Yeah.
ecosystem. And actually, PEI's commitment is by 2040, which is even more ambitious than the rest of us.
Excellent.
So we need to. We don't need to be just looking to save a little bit of energy. We need to be looking for what is the pathway for every building to achieve net zero on that trajectory.
So that's what you mean by like a deep retrofit. It's more
Yeah,
than just 20% savings.
yeah.
It's a lot more than that.
It's 50% energy savings, and we're also looking at, this part isn't maybe fully baked. The program that we're
Mhm.
funded under is it's a decarbonization program. And so it wants, NRCan would like for us to be targeting 70% or higher greenhouse gas emissions reductions with each retrofit as well. Now,
Mm.
depending on the grid in each province, that's very different in Nova Scotia versus Newfoundland.
Right.
Newfoundland is already very low carbon grid. And so to get 70% GHG reduction, that's challenging because
Yeah.
their GHGs are kind of low. Then
Mhm.
on the other side, Nova Scotia, our grid isn't very clean yet. And
Right.
so we could fully electrify a building, but with today's grid, we can't quite get to that target. but
Right.
within 5 years, the grid will be where we need it to be to achieve those savings. So
Yeah.
that part's a little bit more complex, but
Yeah.
certainly getting 50% energy savings gets most of our buildings into the territory where we can start to be looking at, we can add renewables to those buildings and be in a net zero energy scenario.
Well,
Some buildings it's more, but
well, yeah, right. Now, can you also scale? Like, if you have, like, there's downtown Halifax, there's high rises, and then
Mhm.
there's smaller, buildings which are 4 units or something.
Yeah.
Can you adapt?
Yeah, the one thing that makes it, or one of it, I mean, it's not the one thing, but the sort of situation that makes all deep retrofits challenging is that every building has this, buildings are complex. They're
Mhm.
made up of multiple interrelated systems that all impact each other. So every deep retrofit is a custom design solution right now.
Mm.
And the thing that happens a lot is like owners will get two or three contractors in for advice on how to save energy, or I want to do this or that.
Mhm.
And they get a lot of information that sometimes is confusing, might be contradictory. And so, yeah, so we really, we know that building owners need this advice, but it's also very expensive to have engineering studies.
Right.
So, um, the approach for a small building is very different than the approach for a large building. Smaller buildings typically, and we don't want to generalize because we don't have all of the solutions made yet, but often the smaller building needs a much more envelope focused solution compared to a large building where the mechanicals are much more impact in their overall energy use. But
Hmm.
really, we find that both, like in the spectrum of buildings, all buildings need both a mechanical and a building envelope um, upgrade to really be doing what we need them to do. That's We envision that after we've done a considerable number of studies, we'll start to be able to put together some patterns that really are indicative of, like, this is like the recipe for a
Right.
particular building archetype. So
You have like
that
a template created.
Yeah, so that, they won't be perfect, but rather than every building owner needing to work with a fairly specialized team of design consultants to understand what they have to do,
Mhm.
that we'll be able to just sort of apply the recipes as an approach across different building archetypes.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that kind of ties into the roadmap.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're working on a roadmap that's
Mhm.
about to be launched soon, right?
Well,
Or is it under development?
it's under development. So I'll tell you what's going on with that. So the
Yeah.
retrofit roadmap is a research project. Uh, we're definitely kind of up to our eyeballs in the roadmap, but it'll be a while before it's launched. So the stage that we're at right now is we're gathering data. So phase one of the retrofit roadmap project is essentially collecting energy use data and sort of other pieces of information about all of the buildings in the region. We're capturing data both on commercial, institutional, so the kind of part 3 buildings, as well as residential, small, single family, part 9 buildings.
That's
Um,
huge.
it's
That's
huge. It's a lot.
cool.
Like we're the data collecting stage of this research is intense.
Where do you
Um,
get the data from? Like Nova Scotia
um,
Power
yeah,
or
exactly. So we're working with the utilities in each of the Atlantic provinces. We're working with actually property valuation services, so we can, tax data. So there's this very complicated combination of sources that we're getting the information from. Um, we have, like the doing that and sort of negotiating for that information. There's some legal intricacies with data sharing agreements, so that we had to work that out. We kind of, before we could start, we had a little bit of bureaucracy to deal with. But the research team has collected most of the data. There's just a little bit more. And then once we have it all, so we'll be able to contextualize the energy use for the whole region from buildings. And really, we have information from like census data and Stats
Mm.
Canada, and we have some sense, like Enercan has some sense of the energy and greenhouse gas emissions associated with our region's buildings based on sort of archetype modeling and just applying, like kind of looking at, okay, we have so many of this building and that, there's an energy model where the average building uses this, but it really is very high level information, whereas we're actually gathering the data. So we're
Wow.
going to kind of calibrate what we get from the data against Enercan's archetypes. So they have Hot 2000 models of sort of this size apartment building, this size office building. There's kind of, I don't know how many. There's a pool of archetypes, and so we can use those Hot 2000 model archetypes to kind of model the actual buildings in our region. So that's phase two, where we're taking, we're going to have like a little team of energy modelers doing, manipulating the data that we've collected and really coming up with modeling scenarios for that energy savings that we're looking for.
Awesome.
And then we'll write the roadmap based on what that finds. So we'll
The
be able
data.
to say where Atlantic Canada, in each province of Atlantic Canada is going to, here's the recipe for us to gain momentum on saving energy from buildings in each region through this sequence of steps. So we focus on maybe these 10 building types first.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, I have two questions, and one is, what's an archetype?
Yes.
And the second one is there seasonality to it all? Like, because there's winters and summers to this roadmap. So, yeah, what's an
Yeah.
archetype?
So a building archetype, what we mean by that, I mean, it's kind of an architect term, I guess. But essentially, an archetype is well, it's kind of like a type, but it's a combination of characteristics about a particular building. So it would be sort of like the general size of the building, so a 2 or 3 or 8-story building of
Square
of a
feet.
certain geometry. There's also, if you think about the sort of boxy apartment building kind of shape versus maybe a church, right, which might be much more articulated. They have
Oh,
very,
okay.
the surface area of a building gives you a lot more heat loss if it's a very
Interesting.
articulated building envelope. So there's about, there's sort of the complexity or the form factor of the building gets baked into the archetype, as well as the age of the building. A building built in 1950 is
Mhm.
going to have a very different energy use pattern than a building built in 1990.
Yeah.
So age, and then what's the building used for? So is it residential? Is it occupied 24/7? Is it an office with a very clear 9 to 5 energy use pattern? The
Right.
buildings, physics is fairly easy to predict, but then human behavior is this wild card in there that we have to kind of model energy use patterns. So we kind of put buildings, we categorize them into the most prevalent
Mhm.
archetypes that we're seeing across our region in order to get clarity on where it makes sense, where we can scale success the fastest through this
Cool.
modeling.
Yeah.
And then the models that we do look at a full calendar year. So they're
Okay.
also based on climate data, like that energy use pattern would be based on um, kind of climate data that's specific to an area or a location. And so
Yeah.
that energy use of the same building in Halifax versus northern Newfoundland is going
Yeah.
to kind of,
Exactly.
it's going to be different. So also that climate data is going to get captured in the energy modeling. So
Mhm.
um, so the pattern of historic weather is obviously something that we have lots of records on, but the wild card is we have no idea exactly what's going to happen in the future. So there are things we can do in energy modeling and things that we should do when we're energy modeling, like we need to consider the the trajectory that is most likely in terms of climate change. We also need to kind of consider what if we start to see warming happening faster than we're currently seeing it, and model those scenarios and do a bit of analysis around what are, where do we think it's going to be? I mean, we can, you know, for this exercise, it's less important maybe than for if you're actually designing a full building based on that climate modeling. But when we're designing buildings, we should be looking at how do we not overheat these people in the future as much as how do we save this energy in the winter time. So
yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting. And you mentioned about saving energy. I mean, there's probably energy storage that you're considering as well, like all of those things.
Yeah, and the technology is really changing and evolving
All the
constantly.
time.
So developing a roadmap, like I mean, I think that it's always going to make sense to focus on conservation before we focus on generation and storage. But we need to be making our buildings, as we're making changes to our buildings, we need to consider that as one of the design criteria in any project we should be thinking about. Are we making this building, are we making it so that maybe it could support solar? Are we making it so that there could be places for batteries? Just like designing with some flexibility for the future is critical. Yeah, but conservation first always.
I saw conservation first always. And before I leave you, I want to ask a question. I saw an interesting quote the other day, and it said, retrofitting a building is more than just putting on a heat pump and replacing the windows. There's more to it than that,
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting note because it's, especially a deep retrofit as well. And so what's next for the ReCover initiative?
Yeah, so we do have some other projects cooking that aren't quite as far along as this, and a few tidbits maybe I didn't mention before. So as we're doing this, we're very aware that that there need to be mechanisms to keep generating acceleration. And so as we learn whatever it is we're going to learn, we want to be developing tools that can quickly be used to inform decision making for deep retrofits so that we can help influence people to have the confidence to take on deep retrofits. So some of our tools will be related to developing or enhancing people's understanding or literacy about the options and opportunities that are available in fixing buildings and making them better. But also, so those would be kind of more focused on lay people. But then in the industry, the construction industry is there's so much opportunity in new builds that we need to kind of maybe persuade some more work to happen in the deep retrofit sector. And so if we can develop tools that de-risk deep retrofits, both for kind of design professionals, but also for the labor sector, then maybe we can also make them more interested in doing those projects. Like a new building is always less risky, and that's a problem for the deep retrofit movement. So building tools and figuring out, sort of ways to inform people as we learn, of what we learn. And then the other thing is on the equity front. So a thing that, sort of adjacent to that issue, and we have a commitment to implement our projects, at least 10% of our projects, in equity deserving communities. So
Mhm.
we've actually done a pilot project with the African Nova Scotian community, and we are working on ways that we can work with Indigenous as well. So we have one of our project partners is the Union of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq. But with the projects in those communities, we're actually also including a job shadowing program where youth from those communities can sort of come along for the ride with the design professionals who are working on the project. So with the African Nova Scotian project, we had actually two kind of rounds of a pilot project where African Nova Scotian youth got to be in the architect and engineers' offices and even go to construction sites for some tours
Yeah.
with those professionals to sort of maybe, obviously they were youth who were interested in maybe being in the field, but because we have a scarcity or a need to increase the numbers of people in industry, we're trying to be creative about maybe
Yeah.
encouraging people who are not in those jobs historically to
Well,
consider them. So that's,
yeah.
yeah. So more
Well,
projects like that will likely be coming as well.
that's good because coming up on a podcast very soon, I'm going to be talking with NSCC, who
Amazing.
are going to be developing, projects. They're, of course, they're trying to train the workforce, and I'm going to ask a question about retrofits, definitely.
Please
I'm gonna
do.
put it in
Thank
there. Yeah,
you.
yeah, exactly. Well, and another question, Nova Scotia, I love how your data is Atlantic Canada focused, and it's unique to this region because this region is unique. We get a lot
Mhm.
of storms here. We have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of old, beautiful historic buildings, that need to be efficient. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I really wish you and your organization all the best. And as you launch and move forward, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of homework and data collecting, and more power to you.
Thanks, Maria. I really appreciate the interest in our project.
That was Lorrie Rand, co founder and design director of the ReCover initiative. This nonprofit is filling the retrofit gap in Atlantic Canada, and I wish them all the best. I'm your host, Maria McGowan. We'll see you next time.